Elden Ring is a death simulator which ate my soul and killed my cat. I am reviewing this game months after its release because during the time this game had came out, I experienced cripplingly depressing pathos and the suicide of my own ego. But please ignore that because we got over 70 hours of footage to condense into a review that is not meant to influence your opinion on the game, but show off the sheer mental trauma this cross of Berserk, JoJo's, and Game of Thrones had caused me. And hopefully, maybe, potentially even, add to the conversation of how great this game is. Created by practicing torture inflictor Hidetaka Miyazaki, Elden Ring is an RPG where we roleplay a victim that is tasked at claiming the Elden Ring, an overpriced gaming PC left behind by the Greater Will, the chief force that dictates all things that happen in the lands between. The only problem is that we must defeat the demigod children of Queen Marika and her male counterpart, Radagon of the Golden Order. Like all deep stories from my Body Pillow Factory, the story of Elden Ring is a convoluted mess of philosophies, ideals, and crippling depression. But what's worse is that very few things are explicitly told to you, as the story is mainly told through talking with the NPCs who oftentimes lie to you. It's a strange choice, but Miyazaki made it this way by design to replicate the experience he had as a child where he would read up on Western myths and stories, but had a weak grasp at English, so he'd fill in the blanks for himself, which is actually really sweet and wholesome considering this game is about brutally murdering everything in sight. My main point here is that we never should have dropped those bombs. There are 6 endings in this game, 4 of which involve us becoming Elden Lord. Otherwise, we could have become the Lord of Frenzied Flame or Ranni's consort and establish an order for her. But let's be honest, are we going to be lonely on our temporary throne, cave into the flame of frenzied cringe, or are we going to follow the monogamous wife, Ranni, who gives us a Moonlight Greatsword as a dowry? Our adventure starts with a mandatory death, and after completing a short tutorial, we are unleashed onto the world. A white-masked man informs us that we are homeless without the M and points us to Stormvale Castle, where we meet our first stats wall, Margit the Fall Guys. Excuse me, what are your pronouns?
Unlike you blue-haired liberals, I don't use pronouns. You shall only refer to me as Sugma.
Sugma?
Sugma balls!
Margit represents Elden Ring's thesis statement, which is if I put an overleveled boss in front of a player, he will eventually run off to do something else because he's realized the window to return Elden Ring is long past. And run off I did, for a little over 10 hours actually. I managed to kill a troll and the Screeching Twins, but very unfortunately I got sent to Caelid and died to the Commander O'Neill O'Reilly O'Connor O'Malley. I'm telling you this story not to accuse Elden Ring of being poorly designed just because I got lost, although the first 10 hours of frustration is forever burned in my mind, but because I hate open world games, I hate craftable items, I am terribly impatient. Yet I couldn't help but continue to play this game because I was interested in seeing what was next. So what was the game hiding from me? It was hiding death. That's what it was hiding from me. After slaying Margit, you were allowed to go into Stormvale Castle, which felt like a freaking safe haven because I was finally in a carefully crafted castle and not in some bullshit open world collecting useless junk on a horse. This is 90% of the game on your first playthrough. I wish I was joking. Godric the Transplanted was less annoying than Margit. Yeah, he wasn't particularly hard to beat, nor was the lady in robes in Liurnia, and Radahn literally had 100 summons in his boss arena, so you can guess how I decided to handle that. But from that point on, I realized something disturbing. I was severely underleveled for Leyndell, which you may think isn't so bad. Just go explore. There's caves, forts, and dungeons. There's a wealth of content and options, but if you think I'm going to have fun going through the same copy-pasted areas and kill the Gold Digger troll 20 times over, or interact with the Stone Cat more than once, I implore you to think for a second. Is having 200-ish bosses worthwhile when they're copy-pasted everywhere? Is having an overabundance of caves and dungeons impressive when they're all the same? If an Elden Ring player goes to 0 health but doesn't hate the game for it, then did he really die? What happened in my case was that I decided to spend a long time collecting the pocket change of homeless amphibians, but on top of that I did something sacrilegious. I found Ranni, her quest, and looked up a guide. What ensued was one of the most interesting and fun experiences I had in a video game, writing down an HIV slip and slide, murdering this thing, it looks beautiful, and marrying the corpse of a blue demigod lady, which all happened because I was listening to the whispers of a doll that I found in a cave. Yeah, I'm probably playing a classic right now. The capital was amazing. You can see that this is where all the budget went, but this place holds a disturbing truth about the game. The mainline bosses are reused content. I like to call this being economical and smart with our existing assets. See, it's one thing to more or less have the claymore remain the same in all of the games, but making a story-relevant boss reuse assets is a rather creative decision. One that I'm sure that all Ubisoft and EA developers will write down when they dissect why this game is better than theirs, ignoring all other factors that make Elden Ring enjoyable. We are sent to roll to kill the fire giant and burn our only friend. This whole area was boring, the boss was boring, we all know it, FromSoft knows it. Let's move on to Fairmazula, a linear platforming section that had the Godskin duo, which was a boss so irritating in concept that I caved in and used the Mimic Tear Ashes to kill them, which I ended up doing for Malekith as well. Malekith is one of the more interesting boss fights in that his first form has what I think are unreactable moves and absurd damage, while also being so fast that I felt like a pregnant walrus whenever I tried to hit him after spending a PhD's worth of time dodging his attacks. Yeah, this fight passed from fun to frustrating very quickly, and I actually ended up using a Mimic on Godfrey after this fight because at this point I just wanted the game to be over. Radagon was actually a fun fight, but for some reason FromSoft thought that not having torrents while fighting this game's incarnation of God was at all smart. But in the end, I guess I did get to marry Ronnie, saving myself from an eternity of loneliness with the evil flame god, so for once something worked out well, I think. Maybe the lore people will tell me otherwise. The gameplay of Elden Ring is more or less everything from Dark Souls 3, except weapon arts can now be applied and interchanged between weapons. A shield attack thing that I never used was added in, and most importantly, there is Torrent, our trusty, magnificent, and slightly confused means of transportation. Among the means of murdering our enemies is Strength, which of the time of me recording was the most frustrating way to play because half of the mainline bosses move too quickly for you to land an attack and not get hit yourself. The more rational and stylish choice is to make a dual-wield katana bleed build to satiate the bloodlust of my 2D bitch and defeat the endgame bosses without suffering a stroke from frustration. Add a level 10 Mimic in for good measure. The last relevant option is Sorcery, which is so powerful, so unbelievably strong that other players actually try to discredit and bully others that got through the game their own way with the tools presented to them. I believe Socrates once said, "The Souls fanbase is toxic like hemlock, so should anyone say get good, be cheery and grab the glizzy." I am not a mastermind game developer, but I diagnosed this game with terribly unbalanced. This game is littered with a myriad of ways to play and level up, but the very last leg of this game has a massive bullshit spike. At 60 vigor, you get diminishing returns on your health. This is a soft cap. The game is saying that this is all the health you need, but most of the bosses and enemies move way quicker than what is reasonable and hit you for all your health. The worst offender, although optional, is Malenia, the Blade of Mikola. In concept and design, I love the idea of this boss fight, but she is at odds with this game. The Soulsborne games have always had a simple premise for their combat, to roll out of the way of an attack and attack yourself. Very simple it is, but this felt good because the enemy's attacks had easy to read wind-ups and your reward for perfectly dodging everything was to get a lot of damage off. That doesn't happen in Elden Ring. The enemies move quicker than ever and have the potential to land multiple hits in the span of a second, so if you're not one-shotted, it will feel like you're getting one-shotted, which is just boring. Now this goes for multiple bosses, but Malenia doesn't feel like she was meant for the game. She feels like she was meant for Sekiro, another FromSoft title that has absurdly fast enemies and even a monkey that throws shit at you. But Sekiro equips you with the ability to parry enemy attacks, which fills up a gauge that gets you closer to killing the enemy. Elden Ring needs a mechanic like this, or the enemies need to be scaled down. The difficulty that made these games fun is tuned up to a point of frustration in this game versus the other ones. It may have sounded like I don't like Elden Ring, but it's quite the contrary. I'm glad that the FromSoft team delivered yet again and are getting praise for their work because games with an actual artistic vision like this are hard to come by. Some of my new favorite bosses and moments are in Elden Ring, such as Rykard, Morgott, and the whole Ronnie questline, just to name a few highlights. Elden Ring is just a breath away from a masterpiece. The overall package is enjoyable, but now I miss the old carefully crafted experiences the previous titles offered. These games were hard 10 years ago because at the time we didn't know how they worked, but now the community knows the rules of FromSoft games. Now it feels like the developers compensate for this by scaling up the damage, speed, and health of the enemies in order to keep saying that they are the guys that make hard titles. I enjoyed this game despite its flaws, and I will continue to play and enjoy it for a long time coming. I look forward for whatever comes out of FromSoft next, so here's an arbitrary score for this game. Fight me in the comments while I suck down a bottle of wine.